All right, so good morning, everyone. I'm Izzy Greenberg. I run the Middlesex Coalition for Children, and we are doing this slightly differently this morning. You can see that we have a new Zoom background, and we have decided to kind of rename these instead of just welcome to Monday morning whatever we're doing. We're now Early Care Connection, and we thought it would be nice to have a new background and to have a new name. Our awesome panel of experts, a lot of people have taken on new positions and things have shuffled, and we have just seen that that these things have been the one constant. This community that we've built here has been a constant, and we wanted to kind of recognize that and create a name and a vision for it. So welcome everyone. I hope you all had a great weekend, restful and meaningful time doing whatever. I hope you got a little bit of a break. So we've got a packed morning this morning. So today we're actually going to start out with John Foti, who is the SEIU Federal Child Care Lobbyist, and he is going to help us understand the end of pandemic era childcare funding and the federal stabilization funds. Once that part is over, we're going to turn to OEC, who has a presentation on BCIS, and we have a number of folks here from BCIS, division of OEC. We've got Cynthia Watts-Elder, who is the legal division director, and Jose Cruz, who's a processing technician for OEC. They will be also helped by Abigail Holder and Shamika Drummond, answering questions and assisting. So first, we are going to go to John, and he'll do a little bit of a presentation, and we will save some time for Q&A. As a reminder, as always, please use the chat to communicate with each other. Use it for any technical questions you might have. Something's not working, but please use the Q&A for questions. I would love if you could hold off on BCIS questions until after John is finished. So let's clear out any of those questions. And so let's get started. John, I'd love to introduce you. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Izzy, and thanks so much for inviting me to be a part of this call this early Monday morning. Really excited to be with everyone and talking all things federal child care. So with that, I'm going to drop a link in the chat to two documents for folks to be able to follow along as I'm working through this presentation. And again, feel free to drop questions in the chat as we're talking about things. If I spot them as I'm giving this presentation, I'm happy to go ahead and answer them then. And if not, I'm happy to answer them at the end once we finish the presentation. But as Izzy mentioned today, I'm here to talk about the end of federal stabilization funds for the child care system as a whole in the United States. And really what this means is that on September 30th of this year, the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that stabilize the child care system in the midst of the pandemic will expire, and then those funds will no longer be available to child care programs and providers across the country beginning on October 1st. Apologies. And what that really means is that without the support from those federal programs, which really put a lot of critical dollars into the system to help a lot of families not only afford childcare during the pandemic, but also help a lot of parents as they began to return to work or find new careers, those funds will be expiring and could jeopardize thousands of childcare jobs, thousands of childcare programs, but also access to childcare for millions of families across the country. As you'll see from the report from our partners at the Century Foundation, roughly 3.2 million kids across the United States are expected to lose access to childcare if federal stabilization funds are allowed to expire. And in Connecticut, that impact is also very real as well. If you look at the state fact sheet that I posted into the chat and that you can feel free to access going forward, roughly 40,000 kids are set to lose access to childcare in the state of Connecticut alone, and nearly 1,000 childcare programs could be expected to close if stabilization funds are allowed to expire without any sort of replacement. And you might be wondering, why is this important? Why does this impact me? And as we know, childcare really got a lot of support from the federal government during the pandemic as an acknowledgement of the troubles that so many families and children were facing. But we also know that those troubles did not begin with the pandemic, and they did not end now that the pandemic, we are coming out of the pandemic. We know that COVID really exacerbated a crisis within the childcare system that had already existed. And the demand for childcare, as people are going back to work and as parents, as children are getting older, is only ever increasing. Therefore, you might be asking, what can we do about this? How can we make sure that the dollars and support from the federal government keep flowing to the childcare system? Basically, what we are going to be advocating for over the next couple of months is, as Congress is debating how to fund the federal government and what resources to put to what programs, we are trying to get the White House and Congress to understand the emergency that childcare is facing with the expiration of these funds set to hit in September. Again, we're looking at over the next year, possibly over 3 million kids across the country losing access to childcare. And this will have a detrimental impact not only on those children, but also the workers in that workforce and also the economy everywhere. You know, we always say that childcare is the work that makes all other work possible, and make sure that parents are able to go to their jobs and do what they need to do, while also being able to make sure that their children are receiving an education and are cared for during that time. So what can you do between now and the end of September? We ask that you weigh in with your member of Congress and tell them that they need to support emergency childcare funds and new dollars to ensure that the stabilization funds do not expire without any sort of backstop behind them. And really, what this will do is make sure that as we continue to fight for a much broader vision for a robust childcare system with robust funding, that this is the bridge to that big future that we're all fighting and advocating for. And really, again, the reverberations that this so-called cliff will have are untold, but we know that it will be tremendous. We know that thousands of childcare providers face losing access to funding for their jobs, which will in turn make it difficult for parents to be able to get the childcare that they need for their families. And what I always like to say is, you know, for every parent who has a child and who needs childcare for their family, imagine, you know, the 5 to 10 minute hiccup in your day that could really throw your childcare situation into a tizzy, whether it's, you know, someone being late or, you know, traffic on the way to drop your kid off. Those small little disruptions in your childcare can make your life disastrous or sometimes even so crazy. Now imagine if that childcare goes away altogether. And like I said at the top of the call, you know, if you talk to any working person, of which we are all one, the demand for childcare is only getting bigger and more necessary as we are building and growing our economy in ways that we haven't for generations. So all that is to say is now is the time for Congress to keep up this commitment to childcare. Thankfully, childcare is an issue that is not only extremely popular among so many people, but it is also an issue that is, some people like to say it's bipartisan. I think it's better to say it's nonpartisan. Making sure that children get a good education, that family has access to resources, that everyone in every community is able to find a childcare provider and able to afford afford it, that is something that everyone from any background in any part of the country can agree on. And thankfully, Connecticut has some amazing elected officials at the federal level who are nonstop fighting for childcare funds and making sure that we invest in working families. But they need to hear from you all, the folks doing the work, the folks making sure that children all across the state of Connecticut get an good early childhood education. They need to hear from you about not only the necessity of these funds for you to be able to do their job, but what it means for the children that you provide an education for, that you care for, what it means for the families that you interact with on a daily and weekly basis, and what the consequences would be if those funds are allowed to expire. So with that, I hope that you take these facts to your federal legislators and say, hey, we need emergency federal childcare funds. And luckily, there is going to be some legislation coming in the forthcoming weeks to do just that. But between now and then, you can really just making sure that your federal elected officials support additional funding for childcare, and that they will do everything they can to make that a reality. And just to say, you all are, again, the work that makes all other work possible. So thank you for everything you do on a daily basis, but also know that SEIU is working day in and day out to make sure that the federal government invests in good childcare jobs in communities that will see the benefit of good childcare providers in them. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Meryl, I'm going to turn to you to start with. Do you have questions for John that we have a couple in the Q&A, but I want to sort of turn it to you first, because I know you know what's on folks' minds.
Okay. So I understand that the House came out with a budget and that they're looking at generally lower numbers than the target amounts that were in the debt limit negotiations. That they had money in there at the current level for CCDBG, but then they cut a bunch of other things. So what's the strategy in the Senate to try and restore those things when the House Republicans are trying to cut things?
Yeah, it's a great question, Meryl. And for as Meryl had mentioned, basically the House majority is putting together funding levels that are drastically below what the Speaker and the President agreed to earlier this year. And frankly, the Senate has been working in a much more bipartisan, collegial manner. In fact, just last week, Senator Murray and Senator Collins, who are the lead Democrat and Republican on the Senate Appropriations Committee, which drafts all the federal funding bills, they agreed to additional funding outside the caps, acknowledging that there is a need for more support for a lot of programs in the labor HHS and education space. And all that is to say, Meryl, to your point, we are expecting flat funding for CCDBG this year, but in the House, they cut Head Start by an additional $750 million. Title I funding was cut by nearly 80%, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of deeper cuts in the House bill, and really the only reason for that is the fact that House Republicans have decided to write bills that are lower than what was agreed to earlier this year, basically advocating for deeper cuts than what they agreed to when they came to a deal with the Senate and the President. And really, there is kind of really no reason for that. They are essentially leaving money on the table. And a lot of those cuts that I just referenced, the cuts to Title I, the cuts to Head Start, are not necessary if the House simply adheres to the deal it made with the Senate and the White House. In terms of making up dollars in the Senate, unfortunately, the way it looks like is the House is basically expecting the Senate to clean up its work. And frankly, the terrible aspect about that is it is allowing elected officials in the House to get away with voting for steep cuts to childcare, cuts to Head Start, etc., without feeling the pressure for it, because their talking point is it'll be solved on the other side. And frankly, we just can't expect that, and we can't expect that to happen. And so what I would say to folks is, if you can sort of remember where we were 3 years ago with, before the American Rescue Plan, when a lot of people were saying, we can't do this, we can't invest in these programs, we don't have the money, those usual lines we hear every time it comes time to invest in working people. But we did it, and we saw the real results of that. People were able to get through the pandemic and keep food on the table and provide for their families and at their job because of those critical funds that were put forward. And so really what we want to do over these next couple of months is not only make sure that we build support among folks who have been fighting for childcare funds, but also to the point, hold those who are trying to cut childcare funds or reduce education in other spaces accountable for those actions. And just to say, we should not be pitting early childhood education and childcare against funding for students with disabilities and access to higher education. That is not a good, as a society, but also as a country, that is never a good thing to do, to pit people against each other and say, well, we only have enough for this and we only have enough for that. It's not true. The premise of that is false. But also, every child and every person needs access to a good education, and we cannot shortchange them now because that will shortchange our future as well.
Yeah.
So I have one more question, which is, given the 7 members of Congress that we have in Connecticut, Rosa has, been the appropriations chair when the Democrats were in control of the House. Is she still the ranking member now?
Yes, she is. And I see a question in the chat about who is leading this work at the federal level. And Connecticut members of Congress likely to be a lead. And Merrill, to that point, Congresswoman DeLauro, Chair DeLauro, as she will always be to us here in DC, is still leading this work for House Democrats, and she voted against the debt ceiling agreement for the reason she knew early childhood education programs were going to be shortchanged as a result of that deal. And frankly, she has also been such a stalwart champion through the pandemic, but also as we're trying to deal with these stabilization funds now. So I would say if folks are looking for people to weigh in with, she is obviously the biggest champion, and we should encourage her to fight for additional funding and emergency childcare supplemental funding. But also make sure you talk to everyone else: Joe Courtney, John Larson, Jim Himes, Johanna Hayes, Senator Blumenthal, and Senator Murphy, and make sure that they know about this too. Because even though they might not be in the room with Rosa leading the fight, their support and what it means for Connecticut will definitely reverberate through the people they talk to. It's kind of like, you don't, when you need a lot of people to do something, you don't just tell one person, expect them to get a room of 500 people to get something moving. You shout it from the rooftops, and you make sure everyone knows, and that they can tell their friend if they're sitting right next to their friend and can talk to them. And thankfully, we have a lot of amazing champions in Connecticut who are going to be fighting for this, but they need to know about the need for this emergency funding and how important it is that they go above and beyond what was agreed to in the debt ceiling deal.
Yeah, thank you. John, there's a question. People are wondering if you're going to be planning any in-person events to advocate for this.
That might be aimed at us.
Oh, that's us. That's hilarious. Okay, let me put a pause on that question then. But John, if you have anything that you know of, you're certainly welcome to answer that.
Well, I will say we will have some resources and materials coming out in the next week from the International, helping you not only talk to your legislators about this, but how you can call them and leave a message at their offices, but also how you can do things like writing letters to the editor, joining town halls, etc. throughout the month of August, of which all of Congress will be back in district and holding town halls. So we will definitely have some more of those materials to come. I will will say this over the last 2 weeks, we have sort of been in a good place where there has been so much momentum behind this issue that we have not been able to generate the materials to keep up with all that is happening. But we actually think that Senator Sanders is going to be releasing a standalone bill to do just this, to include all this supplemental funding that we're talking about over the next 5 years. So we anticipate that there will be a bill soon. So I would say just keep an eye on your inbox for the next week or so, because you'll be getting not only all the information we talked about today, but some new information about what we're doing and what we're driving to make this a reality and to get Congress in motion on this.
Yeah, great. And we can forward that along. Typically, we use the ECE listserv to forward things to folks. So if you're not a member of that, we will, of course, put into the chat how you can become a member of that to get any updates. There's 2 more questions here that I want to go through, and then we'll move on to BCIS. John, I don't know if you know the answers to these, but let's try. What percentage of Connecticut kids are set to lose childcare, and what percentage of childcare jobs are projected to be lost? The numbers are high, but I don't know how many kids and jobs we currently have. So this is somebody who's sort of like, what do you imagine? And that, you know, again, I don't know exactly what your level of expertise on this is, but do you have any sense of that?
Yes, and so I don't have precise percentages, but we do have estimates from our colleagues at the Century Foundation, and here are some key statistics from them. A little over 37,000 children in Connecticut would be expected to lose access to childcare as a result of federal stabilization funds expiring. Over 900 programs would be expected to close, making it even harder for folks to find good childcare options. Connecticut parents would lose out on roughly $132 million in earnings as a result of having to leave the workforce or adjust their hours due to the result of loss of care. And then roughly 4,800 childcare jobs would be lost as a result of stabilization funds. And again, this is just in the state of Connecticut. And really, what I think would be good for folks to think about this is not as just a, taking a slice of a pie out from the whole pie, and suddenly 1% of childcare jobs are lost, or let's say 4 or 5. Again, those are just imaginary numbers. But it's really about a domino effect. Again, you lose a few folks who are providing early childhood education in one town, that might reverberate around that town in a much bigger deal than can be captured by a single statistic about one place closing, or one person closing their doors, or one provider going out. So it's really about the domino effect that this will have from going from the immediate loss of funds and providers beginning to close their doors. But then what that'll mean for communities, as again, as folks are trying to go into the get new jobs and find new things, but otherwise can't because they can't get access to childcare. And again, this is not going to be an immediate thing. On October 1, you're not going to wake up and 1,000 childcare programs are gone. But as the state of Connecticut starts to say, oh, we have less dollars as a result of stabilization ending, they're going to begin to make those cuts going into the next budget year. And then that'll have a slow domino effect throughout the not only the entirety of the economy, but also our communities, right? So as much as those fact sheets in the chat will help you get a immediate impact on childcare itself, really the domino effect on our communities will be much larger.
Yeah, thank you. Ava, let me turn to you. Ava, you there? Okay, well, I guess not.
Am I here?
There you are. Yeah, now we hear you.
I just wanted to say thank you, John. I don't have a question, but I wanted to say thank you for taking the time. I know that we see each other in other spaces and other calls, and it's just so great to have someone that's so focused on all the details and minutiae. So hopefully we'll have you back on when Rose is here in September 18th.
All right, awesome. John, thank you so much. It's very helpful, and it's great for us to, we do get federal updates on this call, but it is so great to have somebody who's really focused on just that. And we're so appreciative of your time this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much, and have a absolutely wonderful week. And thank you again.
All right, awesome.
Izzy, there was one question that I answered but it disappeared, and the person that is asking, what about universal pre-K? The fight right now is hanging on to the money that we have. It's not about Build Back Better. It's not about trying to create new stuff. It's that there is a move to slash federal spending.
That's exactly right, Meryl. And I will just say, you all have done some incredible advocacy over the last 5 years to win some amazing things for childcare workers, but also for families all across the state of Connecticut and the country as well. And I also really just want to drive that point home too, as we had referenced with Rosa DeLauro leading this fight in the House. All the work you all will do to build support for her, but also for the rest of the Connecticut delegation will not only matter to the families and children across the state of Connecticut, but also to families across the country as well. So, this work is really important. And also, we don't want all the victories of the last 5 to 6 years to go by the wayside. And we want to build on that. And we want to build a much stronger system than what we have had in the past. So thank you all for all the work you do. And that is totally right, Meryl. This is about holding on to what we have so we can have an opportunity in the future to build something much better.
Great. Thank you so much, John. All right, so we are going to turn to our next segment, which is a sort of top-level overview of BCIS and its functions. So we've got folks from the Office of Early Childhood here this morning, Jose Cruz, who's the processing technician for OEC, and Cynthia Watts-Elder, who is the legal division director. And then supporting this, we have Abigail Holder and Shamika Drummond here, who will be answering questions and supporting this segment. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone to speak a little bit slower for our interpreter, Sandra, who, of course, is doing incredible work, making all of this happen in very, very fast time. So, so let me introduce you, Cynthia. Welcome, Cynthia and Jose. I'll turn this over to you. I know you have a PowerPoint to share. I'll let you do that so you can change the slides kind of exactly when you need to, but I'm here to help if you need that as well.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you, Izzy, and thank you so much for the invite. I've had the pleasure of working with some of the folks on the call, Meryl and Ava and other forums. I've been the agency legal director for a little over a year. Relatively new to the childcare space, but have had a long career both in state government and private sector. Before Jose starts to share his screen and go and walk through the presentation, I just wanted to sort of level set and address the perhaps the elephant in the room. BCIS is not a perfect system, as we all know. Many of you probably know it's a homegrown system. The good thing about that is it can be nimble. The unfortunate thing about that, or the downside, is that we're learning as we go. And one example of both of that, being nimble and learning as we go, I learned over the weekend that a number of individuals were getting multiple BCIS emails regarding their background check expiration date. And that was something that was instituted to remind people 6 months prior to the expiration date, but it's on a cadence that I was unaware of. So long story short, has been disabled, and we'll be working on a different kind of cadence. But I just wanted to put that out there because I got a number of emails about that over the weekend. Okay, I'll turn it over to Jose. We're a small but mighty team. Jose has put together a wonderful presentation. Abigail will support the Q&A. And Shamika is a relatively new hire. We stole her from DCF. She's a lateral transfer as an office supervisor. So over time, the background check folks will be reporting to her. I know many of you have strong relationships with Jill Marini, but as you probably know, Jill has been promoted to Director of Strategic Initiatives or Strategic Planning at OEC. So new faces at BCIS. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jose. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all see the OEC logo? The big purple screen? Yes? Awesome. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jose Cruz. I work for the OAC Legal Division Background Checks Unit, and today I'll be providing an overview of the Background Check Information System, better known as BCIS. In today's presentation, we'll be going over the BCIS roster dashboard, common challenges and questions, BCIS improvements, available BCIS support, and finally, we'll have Q&A at the end of the presentation. Getting started with the BCIS roster, what are the first steps? To obtain access to your BCIS roster, you must have a completed program license application, and you must accept the BCIS generated invitation. The BCIS invitation will be sent to the program admin within 24 hours after the license application is processed by the licensing team. Once the invitation has been accepted and the roster is created, you can begin adding staff or household members to your roster. The following is an image of your program roster. You can view your roster by logging into your BCIS admin account and clicking on the roster link under the menu located on the left-hand side of the browser window. Other features found on the menu are admin email, BCIS ID number, background check status, and this card icon is your BCIS ID card. When a user clicks on the card icon, they will see a pop-up window showing an image of the BCIS ID card that contains key information of the individual's BCIS account, which is a portable credential, meaning that if you change employers, you can use the same BCIS ID. The BCIS ID will show a brief summary of the individual's account, including name, BCIS ID number, email registered with BCIS, the BCIS background check status, the background check expiration date, and the type of background check initiated, which will show as traditional for all centers and family providers. All users can click on the download button to save or print a copy of the BCIS ID card for their own records. Please note that all users must be logged on to their own BCIS account to view and print their own BCIS ID cards. Another feature on this menu is the document link. Clicking on the document link allows all users to view the PDF instruction guides in accordance with the type of roster they are currently associated with. For example, center staff members will view center childcare instructions, and family providers and household members will see family childcare instructions guides, and so on. To view the PDF instructions, simply click on the links that appear within the pop-up window. Other sections on this menu are the personal details section, which shows the user demographic information, alias, and address information. Next, we have the background check section, which guides the user through the required steps to initiate a background check. This section becomes available only after the address information has been entered. It's important to note that all users must provide address history information equaling 60 months or 5 years. If the address history information does not equal 60 months, the user will not be able to initiate a background check until the required information is entered, and the Start Background Check button will not be available. Next, we have the program section, which is only available to program admins and providers. Here, program admins can invite other staff members as program managers to assist with the roster management. To do so, first select the roster you wish to add the individual to. Second, enter the individual's email. And third, click the Invite Manager button to send the invitation. Once a staff member accepts the invitation, they will be given access to help manage the roster. The Program section also includes the Program-Specific Informations tab. In this tab, admins can select the NAFC accreditation for their programs if necessary. In the Main Window section, we have the Roster Selection menu. Program admins that oversee more than one roster will see a list of all the programs they are associated with. Here, you can select the program you wish to view, and the roster information for that program will be displayed. After selecting the roster, you have 3 action buttons available to you. The Invite Person button allows the program admin or manager to invite the staff to the roster. The Download PDF button allows the program admin or manager to download a copy of the roster in PDF format. The Download Excel button allows the program admin or manager to download a copy of the roster in Excel format. The invited staff members on your roster will appear in the lower section of the main window. The visible information for each staff member includes name, date of birth, BCIS ID number, background check expiration dates, status, role, and the action buttons for each individual role. BCIS now sends an email alert once an individual reaches a 6-month window before their background check is due to expire. Also, BCIS will now send an email alerting the user whenever the BCIS status has changed. Please note, in future updates, the status will be written out in its full description within the email and will no longer be abbreviated. The following are some of the BCIS challenges encountered in the field. I will go through them as they appear in BCIS. Incomplete residential information. As mentioned previously, you must enter 5 years of history without gaps in order to initiate your background check. The Start Background Check button will be made available once the 5-year residence information is entered. Obtaining the ATN. After completing the DCF and FBI acknowledgements, you will arrive to the fingerprint submission section, where you will register to CCHRS. A confirmation email containing the ATN will be sent to the individual. They will need to enter that ATN number in BCIS in order to proceed to scheduling the fingerprint appointment. It's also important to please make sure to schedule a fingerprinting appointment right away. Your ATN will expire in 30 days. Service codes. In the fingerprint submission section, the service code will be provided once you select the program type. Please be aware that the service code is not the ATN and should not be entered into the ATN field in BCIS. The service code is provided to you after completing the FBI section. You will need to copy and enter that code when prompted in the CCHRS website. CCHRS registration. In the fingerprint submission section, you will see a purple CCHRS button that will direct you to the CCHRS page. After completing the pre-enrollment, be mindful to close the current CCHRS tab and not close the browser entirely, as it will close your BCIS window and potentially lock the BCIS account, preventing the user from completing the background check. Searching and inviting staff to your roster. Please be aware that when searching for an individual in BCIS, you have 2 options: search by BCIS ID number or search by first name, last name, date of birth, and zip code. You may use the Social Security number only if available. If the Social Security number is not available, using the name, date of birth, and zip code together will allow you to perform the search. Employer email. The provider or director's email must be associated with the program license in order to receive the BCIS invitation. Staff email. All staff members and household members on your roster must have their own individual email address. The system will only allow an email address to be used for one account. Password resets. We understand that passwords can be lost and accounts can be locked. Therefore, we've provided the ability for all BCIS users to reset their own passwords via the password reset button found on the BCIS login page. However, if you encounter any issues, please reach out to oec.bc@ct.gov. Fingerprint results and turnaround time. Generally, fingerprint results are received within 14 business days. If it's been longer than 14 days, contact us at oec.bc@ct.gov. Out-of-state inquiries. We understand that waiting for an out-of-state background check can cause delays. Unfortunately, we have no control over other states' processes. For example, some states require postal mail submissions by the applicant and notarized statements. For all out-of-state related inquiries, please contact oec.bc@ct.gov. BCIS status. A list of BCIS status descriptions can be found on the OEC website. Some of the common statuses are current, which means that all components of the background check have been completed and verified. Work supervised, which means that OEC has received criminal background check results for the individual, but at least one other component of their background check is still in progress, such as the DCF. Needs background check. This means that OEC does not have a record for this person within the last 5 years in our background check system, and therefore requires a background check. A complete list of the BCIS status and descriptions is available on the OEC website, and we provided the link in the speaker notes section of this presentation. The following screen shows the fingerprint submission section of the background check. The service code is provided once you select the background check type or the program type. Next, you will click on the purple CCHRS button. This button will direct you to the CCHRS page where you will enter your service code and proceed to complete your registration. Once you complete the CCHRS registration, you will receive an email containing your ATM number. You will need to enter that new number in the ATM field on the screen. Next, you will proceed to schedule your fingerprints. Please remember, when scheduling your fingerprint appointment, please note that some local police departments may charge a processing fee. The following is a list of common questions from the field. Where are my fingerprint results and what is the ETA? As previously stated, the estimated time frame for the completion of fingerprint results is 14 days. Why do I have work supervised status? This means that OEC has received criminal background check results or fingerprints for the individual, but at least one other component of their background check, like the TCF, is still in progress. This means that the individual can start working while supervised by a staff member with a current background check status. How can I get an ATN? To obtain the applicant tracking number, or ATN, the individual must be registered with CCHRS. BCIS will take the user through various steps leading up to the CCHRS registration. The service code will be provided for you in the fingerprint submission section. After selecting the program type, you will need to copy that service code into the CCHRS website that will open after clicking the CCHRS purple button. How do I schedule my fingerprint appointment? The fingerprint appointment is scheduled via BCIS after completing the DCF, FBI, and CCHRS registration sections and using the fingerprint scheduler to choose your appointment date. How can I reschedule my fingerprint appointment? We understand there have been some challenges with rescheduling fingerprint appointments. However, to facilitate this process, OEC, in partnership with United Way, have ensured that in the continuation of rescheduling your fingerprint appointments by calling 211 Childcare at 800-505-1000 or by emailing fingerprinting@ctunitedway.org. BCIS invitation requests. As mentioned previously, to obtain your access to BCIS roster, you must have a completed program license application and you must accept the BCIS generated invitation. BCIS invitation will be sent to the program admin within 24 hours after the license application is processed by the licensing team. To obtain your BCIS admin invitation, please email oec.bc@ct.gov. BCIS is a growing platform. We've heard your feedback and have made some improvements. Email alerts. Email alerts are now being sent when a background check is due to expire. The email alerts are sent when a user is within the 60-month window of expiration. NAVSE for family childcare. Admins can now request early background check for NAVSE accreditation directly from the roster list under the program section. BCIS ID card. All BCIS users can now view and print a copy of their BCIS ID card that shows a brief summary of their BCIS account status. Please note all users must be logged into their own account in order to view or print the BCIS ID card. Guides and links. We've now included a document link in BCIS to allow all BCIS users easier access to our BCIS PDF instruction guides. The instructions displayed will depend on the type of programs the user is associated with. For example, center staff will view center instructions. Family providers and household members will view family childcare instructions, and so on. Pop-up alerts. We've now included additional pop-up alerts to provide further guidance as you navigate BCIS. The Invite Person button. The text for the Add Person button on your roster has been changed to Invite Person for better clarity. Individual missing from roster. A new pop-up alert has been added when admins click on the roster link. This is a reminder to program admins that if a new person has been invited but not showing in the roster, The admin will need to ask the invited staff to first create a demographic profile, add residence info, and initiate a background check. Available BCIS support. OAC provides several means of BCIS support to assist with all of your BCIS related questions, such as the OAC website. The OAC website is a useful resource and has the latest information for BCIS and background checks. This includes PDF guides, informational links, and instruction videos. Our website link is included in the speaker notes for this presentation. OAC-BC, oec.bc@cet.gov. For all questions about the background check process or requirements, please email oec.bc@cet.gov or call 860-560-4466. When you email or call, be ready to provide your name, date of birth, program name, license number, and the email address which you use to register in BCIS. We also provide assistance in Spanish. Frequently asked questions and PDF documentation. BCIS has a frequently asked questions section that addresses many common BCIS questions. This can be accessed on the left-hand side panel within BCIS. Please remember, when contacting background check staff via phone or email, please include your name, date of birth, program name, license number, and the email address that was used to register in BCIS. And with that, we conclude our BCIS presentation this morning. We're open for Q&A, and thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for speaking so slowly. That was awesome. That's a lot of information to share, so thank you.
Sure.
First, let me go to other folks from OEC. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that before we go into questions?
There was just one thing I wanted to add. I think the phone number is the 860-500-4466. I think, Jose, you may have said 560.
Tell me again, and I'll type it into the chat.
Sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jose. It's 860
Yep.
500
Mm-hmm.
4466.
Okay, and that's the phone number.
The other thing I wanted to mention, and I must admit I haven't checked the plate, but I was told the email address that was provided for the fingerprinting at unitedway.org that is disabled. So the phone number, calling 211 is the best. We're trying to drive people to the scheduling within BCIS, as Jose noted, but we have worked with United Way, have asked them to allow people to reschedule and schedule under some very limited circumstances. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
All right, thank you. Any other things that folks wanted to address before we go to questions? All right, Ava or Meryl, do you have questions that you want to start us out with?
Not me.
Okay.
I don't have anything right now.
All right, we'll just go right into the Q&A then. What happens when an individual lived outside the country for part of the 5 years? And these questions are all pretty specific, so we're just going to go through them.
So when the individual lives out of the country as part of the 5 years, BCIS gives them the option to add that specific date as it has specifically option that says, is this out of the US? And you can select that, check that, and then you just add the dates. It's just going to ask the applicant for the dates. And that will be part of the out of the US dates.
Okay. And a reminder to all of our community members here that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, not the chat. I won't be able to see them there. And if the question you have has already been asked in the Q&A, you can give it the thumbs up, and that will signal to me that there is interest in that question. It kind of bumps it up. So just 2 quick tips. Okay, an FCC applicant for an FCC license received their invite link to active register for a background check. When she clicked the link, it took her to the user login page rather than the page to actually register. Since then, she's had a lot of difficulty with obtaining a new link to activate and register for a background check. She emailed the oec.bc@ct.gov, put in an IT help ticket, and had a very unpleasant conversation with a representative and is feeling discouraged. What can she do? What's the best next thing?
Well, we apologize for any inconvenience. Basically, when the BCIS invite links goes out, if the provider is having any issues like what is addressed in the question, it definitely needs to be sent to oec.bc or open a support ticket, and we will get back to that provider as soon as possible. We are also able to make a call back and walk you through if necessary. So please do that today. Just send us the email. It's oec.bc. And you can mention that you made a question in the webinar, and we will work with you as soon as possible to get you set up
It's oec.bc at
at
ct.
ct.gov.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know the response time isn't as quick as people want. We have a very small team in the process of trying to hire some additional folks. So we thank you for your patience. Regarding that one, you can also plug my email into the chat for escalation, because it sounds like you've already gone through the help desk team. And again, as Abigail said, we apologize for, the IT response wasn't ideal. But I will escalate that. So if you want to put my email in the chat, Cynthia.
Yeah. And we will surely look out for your email today and work with you today.
Great. Thank you guys for that. Can BCIS check criminal convictions from outside of the US?
Not that I know of. I don't know, Cynthia, if you want to pick that up, but no.
No.
It's just USA.
Okay. Email and phone number in the chat. I think that is done. I think this goes back to the question from before about the 5 years, but why does a person's status change from current to needs BC?
So when the status change from current means that all the components are completed and the background check is updated. But when it changed to need BC, that means that that time frame, which is 5 years, has been completed. So BCIS read the dates and it goes back to need background check. But before that, there is an open window of a 6 months notification to each provider who are monitoring their list that their background check will soon expire in 6 months. So it doesn't really go to need BC immediately. It gives you an alert of a 6 months window to start your background check for the provider or their staff. So if you see that today your status was current and tomorrow it's need BC suddenly, and that is not correct, you can also send us an email again, oec.bc@ct.gov. Remember to please include your name, date of birth, and the provider license number. We will look it up and get back to you.
Okay, and I'm just putting that into the chat for folks. So that email and what you need to include are in the chat. Can more fingerprint appointments be made available in Lower Fairfield County? I have staff who've had to wait up to 6 weeks for a convenient appointment. We try to have United Way events, but now having to provide the minimum of 8 participant tracking numbers ahead of time makes it no longer a viable option when it comes to onboarding staff. So maybe that's also a bigger question about how you're distributing appointments statewide.
Yeah, I can work with United Way to set up something. I think it was Lower Fairfield County, southern part of the state. You can send me an email. I didn't know it was 8. It was, our agreement with them was 6, and they would go to a particular program. So the 8 is a number that surprises me. But we have done one-offs, so you can reach out to me.
Okay, thank you. Is the OEC still covering, I assume, the cost of background checks? If so, for how much longer?
Yeah, so we have budgeted to continue to pay the cost into the end of fiscal year 24. So to June 30th of next year.
Okay, great. Will United Way be able to have a demo or dummy account to assist providers in moving through BCIS when they have an issue?
No,
No.
not that I know about.
A sort of sample, you know, just a sample to kind of help you see what happens next. I think that's the idea. It looked like you actually had a number of screenshots though in the PowerPoint that was shared. Would that be helpful for folks needing that kind of visual? Potentially?
Yeah, it depends on what they need from United Way. Basically, we work with the so United Way they mostly provide assistance with the fingerprint appointments.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to do the dummy accounts, but
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the PowerPoint has some screens, and I believe I should know this, but I don't. I believe the website also has, some information tutorials with some screenshots, but that's
Okay.
outside United
We
Way.
did share the PowerPoint in the chat, and that will be available to folks with the recording as well. If a person already got their fingerprints done prior to being hired, do they have to have it done again?
No, the fingerprints are good for 5 years, but all provider needs to remember that the status to start working is work supervised or current. So if the fingerprints were done prior to get that work, the results should be entered in our BCIS system. And that will be good for 5 years once the whole portion is completed.
Right.
And again, that's the new card. So that BCIS card should have the information on it. And it's, as Jose said in the presentation, it's a portable credential. So if that individual wants to download their card, and that is evidence that they've already gone through the BCIS.
Got it. Meryl?
So I was just going to say that's if they got their fingerprints done for the child care background check. If they had their fingerprints done because they were working as a para at a school system, that doesn't count. If they got fingerprints because they were driving a bus, that doesn't count.
Right, that's a very good point, Meryl. Thank you for emphasizing that. Yes, and the commissioner really would like to have, as well as obviously other individuals, to have more symmetry, for lack of a better term, among like SDE for schools, Department of Ed, and other entities, but we're not there yet. They're separate components. But yes, that's a very good point, Meryl. It has to be for childcare.
Okay. How do we request for our site to be approved as a fingerprinting site?
So again, we'd have to work with the United Way and have, again, our threshold is 6 individuals.
And is that a call 211 kind of thing, or email the BC?
Yeah, you can, so I can try to help facilitate. It sounds like that might be a pain point for individuals. You can send me an email and I'll reach out to the, and escalate it a little bit to some of the United Way contact folks so we can make sure that it's done.
Okay, and Sherry Sutera, who is from the United Way, has just put into the Q&A that the UWC email for fingerprinting is not disabled, and she listed it as fingerprinting at ctunitedway.org. So I will post that in the chat, and it's also in the Q&A for folks.
Thank you.
Sure. It's good that we've got a lot of different folks on these calls, so multiple levels of support. If you is the 5 years for everyone in the house for home daycare, assuming they're over 16 years old?
Yes, it's 5 years for everyone, every family household members. So the household members are now 18 years and older.
Why is it that new applicants are required to get an authorization when they are moving from another state but never worked with children?
That sounds kind of different for what is the BCIS. So it depends of what specifically they're referring to. So if they're in another state, they need to complete the out-of-state background check. That is a must because they need to be a check for each state that the applicant have lived. But if it's something different that they're referring to, maybe they can send the specific in the Q&A and we can be more specific to that question.
Thank you. Cynthia, I don't think your email ended up going to everyone in the chat. Is it possible for you to put it in?
Yeah, I think I started saying it and I didn't finish it. Yeah, I'll put it in.
Thanks. Would like to know if my fingerprint is due in, let's see. Would like to know if my fingerprint is due November 2024. How soon can I do it again? So if it's right, if it's due sometime next year, you know, how close to the date do you have to do it? Or is that something you could do earlier if there's a convenient appointment for you?
So once if your fingerprint is going to do November next year, BCIS will send you the alert 6 months before, and it will alert the applicant and also the provider that in the next 6 months, the fingerprints or the background check will be due. And at that point, the system is open to start a new background check process.
What options do we have for an educator who has 3 sets of rejected fingerprints and her doctor says does not qualify for a medical waiver? Is she allowed to work supervised?
Cynthia, would you like to take that?
Sure, I was just realizing I put too many T's, excuse me, in my address chat. So there is the medical waiver exemption process. It sounded like the question that the provider had indicated that the person wasn't eligible, but we are the ones who determine after the provider fills out the paperwork. So I'm not quite sure if there's a little bit of disconnect with that. So it's just 2 rejected fingerprints an individual has to have before they can apply for the medical waiver. And Jose actually, the other hats he wears, is actually the person who coordinates that as well.
There was also a question previously that I saw. The provider was asking that if the doctor doesn't want to sign the medical waiver, or if the fingerprint rejections were not because of a medical issue, if they had another option.
Yeah.
And in the chat, they're saying the doctor stated they don't have a medical condition, which is why they can't have the form completed.
Okay. I think that's a one-off that's going to probably require some conversation, and I don't want to get into people's, you know, purported medical conditions or not, and personal identifiable information on the call. So you have my email. You can reach out to me. We'll try to figure out what the issue is. But if it's purely a medical issue and the medical provider is saying, you know, he's unwilling or she's unwilling to do the waiver, then we have an issue. But let's have a discussion. Since we've gone digital, we, you know, very rarely have individuals that have rejections that are not medically related, like, you know, worn prints because people have been in the industry for so long. So we can have a one-on-one. Thank you.
For NAFCC, can family child care educators forward the background check directly to NAFCC when applying for accreditation, or other organizations who are supporting them to obtain their accreditation?
So for NAFCC, the provider has the option from the roster list to start the background check. We know that they ask for it 3 years and not every 5 years. So that is the action that the provider needs to take from the roster list. And then we have a NAFC template that when the provider requests that template, we send it to the provider to be forwarded to NAFC. That template certify the dates of when was the last background check completed.
Okay. And for folks from OEC, if it's possible to go into the Q&A, I think there's some questions that could easily be answered in writing. So you're welcome to do that if that's possible. Okay. An individual's archived background check information is not available in the BCIS, had an issue with a Head Start FA2 review, i.e. program must provide proof that an individual had a background check prior to start date, but once a background check expires, the newer date on the roster replaces the old date. I don't know if that's a question or a comment, just letting you know. That sounds, I don't know if that's,
it's not kind of clear.
Sometimes I have to read them to understand, like, I don't know sometimes if they're comments or questions, so my apologies.
No, it's okay.
Is there a presentation or guide with steps on how to complete the registration process? And I guess similarly, there is also a request for you all to post a tutorial on YouTube.
Yes, so go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the YouTube tutorial is a really good idea. We can do that. And in fact, Jose had pre-recorded this session in case we had some technical problems. So we can just do that on YouTube. I'm having difficulty trying to answer questions, so I just wanted to take up one. Does the background check show arrests or just if they are convicted? It's just convictions.
Okay,
Somebody-
that's good. Just conviction. So if you've been accused of something but not convicted. Okay.
Probably also wouldn't show convictions from someone who was a minor, would it? Aren't those sealed?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. We sent an invite and the new staff completed the paperwork, but still have not been added to the roster. Is this something where people should put in a ticket, email, phone call? What's the right way to get these kinds of things resolved?
Yes, that is obviously an issue that should be sent. They can put in it. You have the option to put in a ticket or send us an email to oec.bc at ct.gov. And of course, always remember the additional information for the provider, the license number, whoever you're trying to invite and you're still having the issues, name, date of birth, and the email you use. And we will look into it and see why the person is not on your roster.
And again, in addition to our very small team, the IT support team is very small. So there's one individual that's answering the help desk tickets, and he also supports the ECE reporter. He's amazing. He works to midnight on more than one occasion trying to close out tickets, but he's one person. So just as the turnaround time isn't as prompt as you would like for us, it's maybe not as prompt as you would like for IT, but there's only one person who's doing that.
There are a number of things in the Q&A that appear to be more comments than questions.
Yes.
And so I'm going to, what I'm going to do just for folks here, I will take everything from the Q&A and forward it on to all of the folks from OAC who are here so they get all of your comments. I want to make sure that you know that this will not be bypassed just because I'm not saying them out loud. And so I just want to make sure we can get questions answered while we have these folks here. And then I will forward all of these questions and comments on to the OEC team after this webinar ends. So just wanted to let folks know. Okay, let's see. Do we need to keep a copy of fingerprints on the premises for OEC inspectors?
So I don't want to, and it's going to sound like I'm punting, but I don't want to get into what licensing may or may not desire. I think that as a best practice, I think that they do want evidence of that when they go out. If that is, you know, showing them going into BCIS and showing them or printing information, but I don't want to get too much into the licensing specialist arena.
Okay, thank you. There's a few more comments of just wanting to sort of understand the website better. So I'm going to pass that on to you. If a person has already paid for access or entrance into the system, can they get reimbursed? And if so, how?
No, and I'm glad that you raised that question because I think a lot of times people don't realize if they choose a police department, sometimes police departments have surcharges, or I'm not sure exactly how they characterize the fees, and they can be up to $80, I was told. So that's another reason why, you know, we want you to pursue, you know, the state police and not, or United Way, and not go through a local police department. And they sometimes have different timeframes as well. The short answer to the question is no, we don't have a mechanism to reimburse. And it sounds like it might be a police department fee as opposed to ours because we have been covering the fees for quite some time.
Thank you. Can there be more than one admin on an account? If so, how can additional people be added?
That was part of the presentation, but yes, so there's only one admin, program admin, but the program admin can invite program managers to help to assist with the BCIS management. So it is on the roster list on your left-hand side, the program option. You just click there and it will ask you for the email of the person you wish to invite as a program manager. And that person will can assist to manage the roster list.
And we will post the recording of this up on the website in the next 24 hours. So if you missed some sections of Jose's presentation, you can always go back and watch those sections. Okay, if someone has been fingerprinted in BCIS and their status is current and they're being hired, are prints still required upon initial hire as was previously?
No, if the status is current, that means that the background check is completed and fingerprints results are already in the system, also the DCF results.
And again, that's a plug for the BCIS, downloading the BCIS ID card, which
Yes,
is the expiration date.
correct. Thanks.
So someone is saying it appears that there are still kinks being worked out in this system. And so during that time, will centers be able to dispute citations on no background cleared staff if proof of fingerprinting can be shown?
So it sounds like that's a little bit of a licensing question as well.
Okay.
And I would, I'll readily admit that as I started off in my introductory comments that BCIS is not a perfect system. It's a homegrown system and we're figuring it out as we go. But I think that sounds like it needs to be a discussion with the licensing specialist. And certainly if they have evidence that BCIS did not do something properly, they should be providing that to the licensing specialist. And I'm sure the licensing specialist would take that into account. But we try to keep, stay in our lanes a little bit and try not to get into the licensing specialist domain.
Yes, and of course, it's always probably very clear on the OEC side who is doing what. And for our folks, that can sometimes be less clear. So that's a good reminder to try to just, I guess, make sure you're reaching out to the right folks, but also hopefully if somebody's reaching out for the wrong reason, you can respond and let them know who to reach out to.
Generic licensing email as well. It's oec.licensing@ct.gov.
Can you post that into the chat? Great. There is a shout out here praising Abigail for always getting back to folks or finding someone to help. Abigail, you're awesome. Let her and the people know.
Thank you. It's part of a teamwork though.
Yeah,
it is a big effort of a big team, a small team doing a big effort.
Yeah, a colleague referred to her as a sunshine personified. She always has a smile on her face. She's bilingual. She's got an incredible work ethic. Yeah, she's a star for sure, among other stars.
Well, Abigail, you're getting lots of claps. I see them rising.
Share with my team because we're all together in this.
Yes. All right, let's see. If in the past, the police department has charged $25 per person, but because you didn't have availability at a time that we could go. So question really isn't so much about the fee, but the difficulty in finding appointments. So wondering if you can arrange weekend appointments for fingerprinting. So that's a little bit more of a comment, but I'm guessing other folks have been in that situation. So wanted to make sure I said that. And do you all have any plans for that?
I'm certainly happy to engage United Way in some discussions about that, about weekends.
Great. All right, let's see what else here. How to separate household members that were added under one email address.
I was trying to figure out that question, but I'm assuming that the provider is asking if an household member could be under one email, but no. Every household member has to have their own email address to be invited, and remember not to use your provider email because that is associated to your roster license or your roster list.
How can someone figure out if they have registered?
So basically if if you do not have access to BCIS, if you're trying to access when you are thinking that you completed those steps, you can just send us the email again or open a ticket, because we will have to check to see why you're not able to access to your account. But once you complete the steps, you should be able to access to your individual BCIS account, or providers should be able to access to their and see their roster list.
There's
And
yeah, please.
Moment. Going back to the earlier comment about emails, I just wanted to make mention that sometimes emails are found in spam or junk folders as well. We've heard that from individuals. So if you're looking for the invite, please be sure to check junk or spam as well if you don't have it.
Thank you. There's someone who asks, have you thought about contracting with the RESC, the RESC alliances, since they do fingerprinting for schools and have regularly scheduled dates around the state? I know ours does it 2 times a month. So curious if you have plans to partner with any groups who are doing other kinds of fingerprinting sessions.
That's a really good comment or question or thought. We have not, but I'm certainly open to thinking about that.
Does someone have a link to so that they can send to staff to find 211 appointments?
So the link to find 211 appointment, it's in BCIS. So once the applicant is following the steps to complete their fingerprinting process, they will get, once they get the ATN number or the applicant tracking number, they will be able to have access to 211 appointment links and schedule an appointment there.
Okay, thank you. There's a comment-ish question that's just saying that the providers are having problems logging in after creating their account and then have to end up resetting the account. So just a comment about some difficulties there. Just a concern that if someone in the household was arrested for a child-related incident, but is awaiting trial over 2 years or had some misdemeanors, concerns that wouldn't show up, or minor. I guess the minor part we sort of covered that, but if folks are awaiting trial, that's not going to show up in the background check, right? It's just convictions.
It's just convictions, correct?
And then folks, Sherry Sutera has also said that 211 Childcare offers multiple sessions for appointments on days, evenings, and weekends throughout the state. So, I'll that will be in the Q&A.
Thank you, Sherry.
Okay, that's it for open questions. So Meryl or Ava, do you have anything else that you wanted to ask before we let folks go? I know this is very nuts and boltsy, but it's important for folks who have to use this system. For folks who don't, this is probably not the best webinar, but for folks who have to use this, it's good to get all of these details. Georgia is saying Hope in New Haven hosts appointments twice per month during the evenings. Providers in the greater New Haven area can reach out to Tammy if they need fingerprinting. So thank you for that, Georgia. It's good to know that there are some regional options as well for people, and that is in the Q&A. But actually, Georgia, if you want to post that in the chat, then it will show up in the recording, and that might be useful for people after the fact. Okay, Ava, did you have anything? Okay, I guess not. All right. So any last, yeah, thank you. Any last stuff that anything else that Cynthia or Jose, Abigail, Shamika, anything that you want to kind of say before we wrap it up?
No. Go ahead.
No, I just want to remind all providers that if BCIS, if you're having issues, just remember that our inbox, oec.bc@ct.gov is a faster way to get to us. We are working on the emails all day, and we are replying to providers as soon as possible. Just remember that we are a small team, but we are taking care of your emails and your requests.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know it's sometimes difficult when people are typing into a generic email, right? We want that personal touch. We want to have an individual email. But there are more, as Abigail alluded to, there are more resources plugged in to the OEC mailbox than there are their individuals. So they're not really looking at their individuals as much as they are the OEC BC. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time. And thank you for your patience. Again, you know, it's an evolving system. I'm relatively new to the oversight of this group as the legal director, but very happy to have Shamika come on board, and she'll be playing a more active role. So we got another pair of hands on the team, and I'm also hiring some other folks. So thank you for your time.
Great. Yeah. And
Thank
Kristen
you.
also saying that Waterbury Y is hosting fingerprints twice a month from 3 to 7. So yeah, some really good options out there. Thank you so much to the Office of Early Childhood team, Cynthia, Jose, Abigail, Shamika. It's great to know that we've got so many folks working on this, and hearing about all of the kinks. You know, it's important for our people here to know that they can put a face to the name and also see who's on the other end of that anonymous email. So thank you all so much for being here. Ava, can I call on you to tell folks what's happening next week?
Yeah, so next week we have Department of Health. Many of you asked about COVID updates and different things that are happening with the air quality. So yeah, that's next week.
All right, fantastic. Okay, everybody, thank you so much to Sandra for providing interpretation. That was a lot to get through. The links are all in the chat. We will post actually the PowerPoint presentation link is also in the chat, but that will be posted along with the recording to the website in the next 24 hours. Thank you to John again for giving us so much great federal information, the OEC BCIS team for your hard work on this, and of course to our amazing community here of childcare providers and advocates and parents. We're of course nothing without all of you, and so have a wonderful week, and we will see you all next week. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.